VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. I want to get these draft predictions on record because we're not far away from the draft. We've had all kinds of guests on lately, and every step of the way, I try to ask them for their draft prediction because I think that's fascinating to get an array of takes. It seems like the choice, at least for round one, is binary between J.J. McCarthy and Drake May. Although that one show I had a couple weeks ago where we had 3 fan guests on from across the country, and bada bing, they all said Michael Penix as the pick. It blew my mind. But in addition to nominating or predicting who the quarterback's going to be, I want to get 5 draft predictions on record. Last year, I had a mixed bag. I think I was 4 for 7 or something like that. The year before, when we started the show, 2022, I was damn near perfect. So we're going to try to get back on a positive note. But yeah, I'm going to go down the line. 5 draft predictions on VikingsTerritory.com. I also have a bold edition of things that are a little trickier to predict, but this, for the purposes of this show, are ones that are like mundane, ordinary draft predictions and what I want to get on record for these Vikings. So the first, top of the ticket, assuming there's some of you that'll just watch the first one and skedaddle, I do believe the Vikings indeed trade up the board for their quarterback of the future. If you ask me right now, less than 48 hours from the draft or when the Vikings will actually have the pick, I do believe it will be the New England Patriots, and I think it will be for Drake May. It makes too much sense for the Vikings to have May as their guy, as labeled all along. The moment Kirk Cousins left, the moment the Vikings traded with the Texans, everything became attainable via trade, except for Caleb Williams. So I think the way that Drake May fits within the Vikings offense, or could, the hire of Josh McCown, his old coach at high school in North Carolina, and then how May is a pocket passer at heart. I do believe it'll be Drake May for these Vikings, and I think it'll be the pick with the Patriots, probably the 3 first-rounders, and then what other necessary little elements, the pick swaps and shit like that, probably in there. If that is wrong and it's not May or it's not the Patriots, and it'd be kind of sweet if May started a little tumble and the Vikings were able to get him at, pick 4 or below. That'd be really sweet. That's the Holy Grail scenario. But if it's not, then they will make some sort of trade up the board unless J.J. McCarthy slides all the way down to 11 and falls in their lap, which is still probably pretty unlikely, even if the 33rd team, that was their mock draft, McCarthy to the Vikings at 11. Matt Miller of ESPN, who's well-respected, did a mock draft based on the scouts that he knows to talk to ESPN, and J.J. McCarthy fell out of the top 10 there too. So there is a little smoke for this. We had Amir from Vikings Twitter on Saturday night. That was his prediction. J.J. McCarthy slides out of the top 10. Ultimately, I do think a trade will be needed. I think it'll be Drake May, but if it's not Drake May, it'll be J.J. McCarthy. So put me down that the Vikings trade up the board, get their quarterback of the future. That is number 1. Number 2 is defensive tackle is a priority. We saw enough hints in the month of March that they wanted a defensive tackle. Kevin O'Connell's own lips said that they made a run at some of those guys, but they were too expensive. And we probably Kristen Wilkins because of the ties to Brian Flores. But ultimately, Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, Sheldon Rankins, DJ Reader, Grover Stewart, Christian Wilkins, Leonard Williams, all of those guys were there in free agency. You had to get in a bidding war to get them, but those were the defensive tackles that were on the board, and that was a lot. If it was a priority to sign a proven guy, the Vikings could have done it. So I believe that defensive tackle will be the secondary priority after quarterback, of course, which would mean that the pick at number 108, or if Kwesi trades back into the Friday docket of picks, that their pick after the quarterback will be a defensive tackle. So put me down for DT as a priority. In my predictive mock draft that I published at VikingsTerritory.com, it was Mason Smith from LSU. I wouldn't be utterly surprised if they dance with the devil and Tavondre Sweat. His stock should fall based on his naughty DUI that he had a week ago. And if you are into second chances, that would work gloriously for the Vikings because who knows how far he will fall. And that was a dude that had borderline first for a while, but certainly second-round draft stock. Ultimately, defensive tackle will be a priority. That's one of my predictions. Let's see, what do we got next? Next is the kicker. Now, here's the deal on kicker. This one may not be crazy bold, but Kevin O'Connell said personally, was that last week? a little over a week ago, I believe, that there's going to be a kicking competition. And I don't know that everybody saw that press conference, so it's going to be one of my predictions that although Parker Romo from the XFL is the kicker, the K1 right now, is going to be another guy. They're not just going to roll with Romo and claim that is the fix-all, the end-all solution. So that means probably not in the draft, maybe one of those 7th rounders, especially if they keep 9 picks overall like they currently have, but definitely from undrafted free agency. My third prediction is the Vikings will end up with another kicker. Hopefully somebody like Alabama's Will Reichard, or there's is it Andy McNulty from Buffalo? Is there a dude from Stanford? I can't remember his name. Is it Cam Little? Or is that a cornerback? Somebody Cam something as a kicker. My third prediction after defensive tackle is a priority and indeed a trade up the board for a quarterback is when you wake up Sunday morning this weekend, the Vikings will have 2 kickers. One is John Parker Romo. The other one is somebody like Will Reichard or Andy McNulty. There's going to be a kicking competition. Kevin O'Connell basically guaranteed it. Number 4 is you will see a WR3 candidate drafted by these Vikings. I don't think it will be. Hopefully it would be, because we always love drafting wide receivers. I don't think it'll be at pick 108, but it could be if the Vikings somehow trade back into Friday. But I think when we look down at the list of draft picks, whether that's Saturday night, Sunday, or Monday, whenever you do that, that there will be a wide receiver on that list that will be like, ooh, Jabari Thrash, Luke McCaffrey, Brendan Rice, Javon Baker, a guy with a sweet last name. One of those dudes we will be excited about as a potential WR3. And the reason I'm able to predict this and say this in good faith is right now, it's just Jalen Naylor, who we have high hopes for. Don't know if they're ever going to come to fruition because he's always got some concussion or something. Trent Sherfeld, who's like a WR4, WR5 type in Buffalo. And Brandon Powell, everybody loves because of the Atlanta Falcons walk-off. Was it walk-off touchdown? Game-winning touchdown in Week 9 last year. So those 3 guys are probably men you would have slated for your WR4 battle. I think the Vikings, because they didn't re-sign KJ Osborne and have not signed Tyler Boyd, Hunter Renfrow, DJ Chark, I think they're going to be content getting a WR3 from this class somewhere in round 4 or round 5 because this draft is really sweet for WR3 oomph. After, like, there's the 3 guys that are guaranteed to be good at the very top. Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and Romo Odunze. And then after that, there's question marks about, hey, this guy might be really good. And then you have this big pause. And when it shows up in late round 3, round 4, round 5, there's about 15 to 20 guys that are quite good that could, get WR3 job. Maybe that was a little overswinging. About 10 to 15 guys that could be WR3s. And I think these Vikings will end up with one. Jamari Thrash was identified by me in that same predictive mock draft. My good friend Josh Fry, who's on this show all the time, he also had his predictive mock draft. So a WR3 candidate will be found. Finally, offensive line. Now, this one is, they're not going to use some big, swerve in the first round. And, oh, my God, they got, J.C. Latham or some tackle or something like that. It's that right now the Vikings have 9 offensive linemen on the roster. You might think, oh, cool, that'll do the trick. No. Usually they have 16 going into a summer or a 90-man roster. So this roster will balloon to 90 players really, really quick here right after the draft. And by that time last year, there were 16 offensive linemen. Right now, there's only 9. So there's either going to be like this big flurry of free agents, offensive linemen, tackles, guards, and centers, or they're going to draft a couple, or they're going to use undrafted free agency. So my final draft prediction is that at least 2 offensive linemen will be drafted based on just kind of doing the math and the process of elimination on this depth chart. They need offensive linemen. And I believe that at least 2, maybe a guard and a center, maybe 2 interior, 1 tackle. But unlike last year when there was 0 drafted offensive linemen, there's going to be at least 2 this year and maybe even 3. So if you haven't done your mock draft, shame on you, you're procrastinating. Make sure you put at least 2 offensive linemen on there, because if they had 16 last year and they only have 9 now, but you got to think about it. You need more guys for the summer get together. So I think that is a big hint. All right, overall, summarizing, the Vikings trade up the board for their quarterback. This guy predicts Drake May. A lot of folks on this network say J.J. McCarthy. God love him. They're probably right, but I'm sticking with May as my prediction. Defensive tackle is a priority in this draft. Devondre Sweat, Mason Smith makes sense. The Vikings will grab a kicker either late in the draft or more realistically from undrafted free agency. A WR3 prospect candidate is drafted. We get excited about him. Dustin Baker, he can be the guy. Week 1, baby. Or Jamari Thrash or somebody like that. And then finally, a lot of offensive linemen are drafted. At least 2, maybe 3, because the Vikings need them. All right, hopefully you've enjoyed the content to this draft lead up. We have Jackson McIntyre, who used to be over at Pro Football Focus. He's going to talk with us tomorrow, and then that will be our sign-off until after draft night when we can start to break down all of this class. That's all I got on this solo trip, and Skol, baby.